Okay, so now let's work on this clip here, and basically this clip can be really color corrected because I can see a bit of green tint. Blue's not showing quite a dark blue. The red is not showing nice. The white is kind of, it's going on the blue side, light blue. So let's go on the parade. Okay, and you can see that very clearly that on my, if I just expand that to just kind of give you a good understanding, where you can see very clearly that what's more highlighted is the blue. See that? Blue is more on the 768 mark. And then what we have here is your skin tone, and even the skin tone represents the red color there, and you can see that it's still kind of quite a low kind of contrast there. Okay, so if I expand this image and let's kind of make this a bit bigger with your mouse wheel, and with the blue waveform you can see it's elevated kind of readings here because he's wearing blue, so we can clearly see that the blue is quite elevated. It's touching 768. Okay, when we look at the red scope here, this kind of represents the actual skin tones, and you can see very clearly that these are quite on a very low level here. And the green, it's a combination of both really, because you can see from this point here. Okay, so now let's look at the highlights here. So you can see that on my red, the highlights are not quite representative. On a green and blue, they're quite up there. So if you can see, looking at this image here, where would be my highlights? So you look at this point here where it's kind of highlighted. Okay, even with the green down here. Okay, so sometimes it's please don't go too much digging deep how to really go into the scopes itself, but the highlights point, you can clearly see that it needs to be highlighted, to be very honest. If I go back on my waveform monitor, you can see that it needs highlighting. So for example, if I just gain up a little bit, see that? If I gain this down, there you go. Here it's really crushing. There we go. So again, remember that I've got this black line there. It's just making sure that you bring this down and kind of give what black needs down there. Okay, so let's go back on our parade monitor, and you can see that clearly that the highlights are now touching there. So in this instance, what I'm going to do is simply go on my my primary bars, and on here I can just simply bring this down tiny bit. There we go, and bring the greens down. As soon as I start bringing the greens, watch what happens. Okay, so there's a way to set this up. So if I just kind of bring my blues first, let's bring the reds up a bit more. There you go, and let's bring the blues up a bit more, and you kind of start looking at your scopes nearly touching the highlights points. If I just go back on my actual waveform, it's kind of really on the edge there. But let's have a look at our parade grading contrast. So if you just do Control D, see that? So now it's a huge difference with the skin, it's a huge difference with the jacket here, and the red is showing nicely, and the skin tone has come up very nicely as well. You can see that it was a washed out image where now it's very nice and clear. The blacks are black, but still I feel that the green should be dropped down a little bit because it has to level down with the actual main shadows. So if you can look at this point here where it says left, if I drag my little cursor towards green, you can see what happens there. It's more green side. So I'm going to work on the opposite side and watch very carefully what happens here. So if I just undo that and see where it was, so let me just go towards this pink and bluish kind of, see, it's kind of leveling up. There we go. So if I can just stop it right there, and I'm happy with that. And now I can bring the whole thing down a little bit more. Let's bring this up a bit more. There you go. So this is how you kind of start setting up the actual scene itself. Now I can just get the gain up slightly bit. Let me just bring it down a little bit more. And let's go back and do my final touching on the bar as well. Just bring the green up a little bit. Blues. There you go. Okay, so I'm pretty much happy with that. Let's now look at the Vectorscope here. So if you just go on the settings on Vectorscope, so maybe on your settings you can obviously increase your kind of your highlight to actually view properly. Now the key thing here is it says show skin tone indicators. If I click on here, I can see very clearly there is kind of indication happening there, but we can still work on the skin tone. So let's go and work on a tiny bit on the skin tone. So let's make sure you click on this tone indicator, which kind of gives you kind of a rough idea between red and yellow. And you can see this part here is your blue, which goes blue and cyan, comes right down, which is fine. And now let's go on your actual wheels itself, and I'm going to just lift up the gamma a little bit between these two parts. So we're going to just go up a bit more, and you can see that it's been lifted up, and I can go, it's gone too much. See that I'm lifting it up a little bit. There you go. So that you can see the tones have changed slightly there, and what I can do, I can just increase the saturation a tiny bit. So right at the bottom here, I can go and start looking at this image being nice and tidy. So I can always go from the bigger value and then come down. So that's a good example as well. Always start from the bigger and then bring it down a little bit. See how far I can go in. And I'm happy with 65 there. So there we go. So that's your Vectorscope. Just make sure you always have ticked your skin tones, and if you can see the skin tone. If I had this down somewhere here, watch that. See that? So it's not touching those values. If you just undo that, and I can just bring it down slightly. There we go. I mean, it's really your preferences, but as long as you are working within your scopes, like your parades are fine, your waveform is pretty much the blacks are nearly touching the zeros, and the whites are kind of touching the 1023 mark. Okay, so if you can now just have a couple of more images and just experiment, even the things which you've done for your assignment, just bring in your shot scene, see if you can kind of clear it all up and see how it goes with that. Okay. Right, so by looking at these three shots, what we have really covered is a primary grade, and just remember that primary grade is an adjustment which is not specifically targeted to a certain region, but throughout the whole image. So for example, remember when we were working on this car here, the whole regions was covered. I didn't specifically go into the whites or the blacks, or when I came here I didn't specifically wanted to change the red. So just bear in mind that the primary grading is the first step of establishing a finished grade, and it is when you set the contrast and manipulate the exposure of an image to be fixed with general issues, which we did somewhere here. So if I just bring this, if you just press on Control D, you can see that was my image there, and I've kind of fixed the contrast. Right, so just looking at this shot, looking at all my parade, all my vectorscopes, my my skin tones and everything, I can make a decision saying, okay, I really like the image, I'm happy with it. However, a primary gate can have one or two goals, either to get an image to a good neutral place where most of the color correctors could be satisfied, but that could be a starting point to do a color grading. And hopefully next week we'll be looking at how color grading is done within that. So basically, even a running shot, if this guy was if this guy stood up and start walking, and if I want this red to be blue or green, or how I could have I would track all this image down. So hopefully we're going to learn much more advanced stuff. And we'll be looking at more in detail both primary and secondary, but this is just really a foundation to really set your foundations right. That primary is a starting point to get a neutral color balance. So we'll be talking about logs and stuff as well, particular cameras when they are filming in RAWs and stuff. So hopefully you'll understand more about why primary correction is important. Okay, so now just to recap that looking at the color wheels, that the lift usually affects the shadows. You can see clearly that, you know, I can bring my shadows down. Where the gamma, it is mainly for the midtones. I can highlight the midtones, make the midtones look nice and bright. And then the gain, it's basically looking at the highlights. There we go. So we can brighten up the image. I can crush this down, but it won't look good. If you know, if I send this to the broadcast, they'll probably send it back. So just bring it down. It's always good to just make sure, take the highest point, which here I can clearly see where is the highest point. So that's his kind of hand and forehead. There we go. This point is the highest point there. Okay, you can see clearly, and really that's what the color wheel is all about. And please get some images and see, and you'll surprise yourself that things which you've been doing in past, that there's so many clips which you probably have done, it needs balancing. So just do a neutral color and take it from there. And the last one is the offset. Is if I move, you can see the graph, the whole waveform is moving with it. So it's kind of it's just setting up for either I can go for highlights, either I can go really dark. But really offset I would not use quite a lot. These are the two main, the lift and the gain, and mainly for the skin tones I'll use the gamma midtones.